All right, so to start this off, I'm going to read to you from the internet. Yes, the whole internet. What people say generally about the middle grade book Bridge to Terabithia. So here we go. The novel was originally published in 1977 by Thomas Crowell. I guess Thomas Crowell is a publisher of sorts because that is not the name of the author. The author is a lady, and her name is not Tom, or Thomas, or Tommy. Let's see. In 1978, the next year, 1 year later, or in the next calendar year, it won the prestigious Newbery Medal. I believe both Chuck Everlasting... I believe Chuck Everlasting won the Newbery Medal, and I said, what are the criterion for the Newbery Medal if this book won it? Because, spoilers for that episode of Fortress Fiction, I did not like Chuck Everlasting, but this is a contemporary of Chuck Everlasting, came out 2 years later than it, and I like it a lot, and I can understand why it won the Newbery Medal, even though I don't know what the criterion are. I understand it, but I'll get into that a little bit more later. Let's see. I don't want to tell you about the inspiration of it. You can look into that on your own. It's very interesting. It's neat. And, that's all they really say about it. That kind of stinks. So yeah, internet, you're letting me down here. You're letting me down. But I'll go ahead and tell you, dear folks of the internet, what I think about this book. So, if you can't tell, spoilers, I thought it was really good. I liked it a lot. I thought it was fantastic. I'm going to just dive into it as I'm wont to do on Fortress Fiction and in any sort of book chat that I do. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to really be critical of this book because I don't know what to be critical over. I think it was a very competently written book. I think it's age appropriate for anybody. I heard in an interview with the author that I listened to afterwards that it is sometimes a banned book because it deals with, again, this is major spoilers, and I didn't say any spoilers yet for the book, but unfortunately when you look it up, it automatically, within the top results are the spoilers for it. Yes, I know the book was from 1975. It's younger than my parents, but it's not much younger than my parents. Anyway, it's a little crazy to me that you would just spoil the book outright. Instead, you could do something in order to share information about the book. You can talk about the power of imagination and the friendship and the bond between the two kids in it that is central to the story. Because that's a lot of what the story is about. Something huge and, crazy, mysterious, ugly, I was going to say, but that's not quite the right word. Something dramatic happens towards the end of the book, and it might be exactly what turned it into the classic that it is, because I don't know how else you were going to end the story. But I don't want to go into that yet. I'm going to wait a little while longer, even though I'm hoping that you've already read Bridge to Terabithia if you're listening to this. And if you haven't, don't go away, because I'll let you know when the spoiler is coming, and you can run away at that point. So I'll go back real quick. I think this book is very competently written. I was going to say beautifully, but I hesitated, as you heard there for a few moments, because I don't know that the prose is beautiful, because it doesn't try to be flowery, but the things that it describes are beautiful. So, I guess I'll do a little bit of a summary. I'll introduce you to the world of the Bridge to Terabithia. And honestly, I know the girl's name is Leslie and the boy is Jess or Jesse. I think it's Jesse I think that's his actual name. He's Jesse Aaron something or other. Anyway, or Jesse something Aarons, because he gets called by the middle name when he's in trouble getting scolded, as people are wanting to do with kids. So anyway, and of course, I mean, even kids with other kids. I'm sure his sisters have picked up scolding him from his mom. Anyway, so first of all, or I guess one more thing, I got this from Cloud Library. I really like the edition I got from Cloud Library. It's HarperCollins Audio was the production I listened to. I don't know if the HarperCollins Audio version is on Audible as well, but I do know that there's a version of the audiobook on Audible, which I will try to share that information when I can, so that if you wanted to listen to this for free, you could, or if you wanted to go ahead and buy it, you could. It's a good book. It's definitely a recommend. It's definitely something I think I'll read or listen to again, and I'll definitely tell my kids to read it. I've already told my daughter, actually my eldest, to read it, and I wouldn't mind owning a copy of this. It's a really good book. So, anyway, to give you some context, it's about a boy and a girl who, no, they don't fall in love. It's not one of those weird books. It's about a boy and a girl who are kids growing up in the South in the 1970s. At some point, we don't exactly know when. It's post-Vietnam War, but it's very possible that women are still wearing bell-bottoms. They're definitely wearing tight jeans, which is mentioned, and I'll get back to that later. But, The boy is one of 6, I believe. So I think he's got 5 sisters total. There's a baby. There's the sister younger than him. Maybe there's 5 total kids. Then there's his 2 older sisters. Gosh, I thought they were like his 2 older nasty sisters, and then there was 1 older sweet sister. So it's either a family of 5 or 6. I don't really know the specifics. I'm going to say this, and I mean it with confidence. The specifics don't really matter. How could you say that? Because they don't. It's the emotional journey that these characters go on, and it's really Jesse and Leslie who we care about most, and everybody in the story that exists around them is just to texture the story and texture their stories and give them the background that they need, to give them the ambiance or the environment that they need to exist in. Like, they have to have a mom and a dad. You could have even minimized the parents' role and had it be okay, but I think it's better for including them as much as it does. And they're not included a lot. They're very much, like, the kids are very much, Jesse and Leslie are very much the characters. And it just flashed in my mind that I'm saying her name wrong, Leslie. It's not Leslie, but it is Leslie. I know that for sure. I'm going to stake my reputation on it that I know for sure that's her name for one reason. Which is that there's the actor Leslie Nelson, who's a comedic actor who's been in a bunch of stuff. And at one point, when she's first introduced, Leslie, Jesse is not sure if she's a boy or a girl because of the way she's dressed and her youthfulness and the fact that she hasn't gone through puberty, I'm sure is part of it. She's 10 to 11 throughout the course of the book. I don't know how much the year starts. I don't know when it starts, but it ends around May. It's like after Easter it ends, and that's specifically called out. So that's why I know. Maybe it's as late as June or creeping into summer. I'm not sure, but it's definitely not early in the year. So I am trying to explain to you, Jesse is one boy in a family of girls. His dad works so hard because they're so poor, and he's hardly there, and he doesn't play with his son anymore. And Jesse is into the arts. He's into the arts. That's a stupid way to say it. Sorry, excuse me. I don't prefer to talk like that. Jesse is an artist. He loves to draw, and he thinks he wants to be a cartoonist or a comic book drawer or something like that. Probably a cartoonist, but maybe he's into comics. I don't think he mentions at all specifically in the book that he reads comics, but we do get to see him reading classic children's fiction, or classic fantasy, really, which was in the beginning kind of all geared towards or understood to be for children. So I think that's how I perceive it anyway. Anyway, so I'll move on. So that's Jesse, and then the other principal character is Leslie. Leslie is his friend. She's the weird girl. She moves in at the place next door, which apparently is a place that lots of other families have lived at, and it's kind of like one of those cursed, like if you grew up in the suburbs, in like retail, there's like the cursed storefront in the strip mall, like, oh yeah, that place, it never stays open. It always changes, and it just cycles through again and again and again to be different places, and that's kind of the same thing. I think it's the old Perkins place is the one where nobody can seem to stay. And that's not really significant. It's just a detail that her family moves there. And it's her mom and her dad and her, and that's it. So she's an only child, and Jess feels like he's an only child. He's the only boy, and he's the only one who's at his level currently. Everybody else is at a different level. He's got older sisters who are trying to be into boys and be into fashion, and they're kind of nasty and catty, and the little sisters kind of copy them a little bit, but they're also very babyish, and one of them is a hanger-on who always wants to play with him, and she's got her own hanger-on who always wants to play with her, and it's just an interesting, like, it's a very realistic family dynamic. Like, it's 100% super, super, super realistic, and I've been exposed to these sorts of family dynamics on multiple fronts, and I can just attest to the fact that it's like super accurate. So that's really cool. And that's the context of the story. That's where it's taking place. And you go to their school, they visit each other's homes at some point, and then there's this, the book is called Bridge to Terabithia. MJ, why aren't you talking about Terabithia at all? Well, because Terabithia is just another thing that exists in the background, in my opinion, to service their stories together. I suppose this is where I'm going to kind of, sort of, maybe, but not really, start spoiling things a little bit. So, Terabithia is, unlike the film adaptation, which apparently was approved of and done in cooperation with the family, Kathy, gosh, what is her name? I can't remember the last name. Sorry, of the author. But you should check out some of her other books too, because apparently they're good stuff. Anyway, so yeah, unlike the film adaptation, there is no Narnia-like fantasy land that the children enter into. They know they're playing, and there's something magical in the fact that these two outcasts, for lack of a better term, Jesse and Leslie, end up working together and playing together and having a special friendship, which again does not blossom into a romance. There's nothing that there's no kiss scene, there's no holding hands, there's no hugging, there's nothing like weird to make it age inappropriate. It's like an innocent relationship that the two of them have. It's a strong relationship. It's a powerful bond that is formed between them, but their maintenance of their keeping up with the game that is Terabithia is a beautiful thing. It actually makes me think of, or as I was listening to the book, it made me think of the magic that is children at play, because the power of imagination and the willing suspension of belief, not disbelief, the willing suspension of belief that I'm going to stop believing in this mundane, difficult world I live in, and for a little while I'm going to believe in something better and believe in something different, believe in a world of my own making. That's beautiful. That's really beautiful, and that's something that you get to see in this book, and it's charming. It was super charming. It was super charming. It was super beautiful, and it didn't need to be lofty or use fancy words or things like that, and it didn't need to be, it didn't need to be anything other than an innocent, sweet, lovingly told story of these kids escaping into each other and into this fantasy world that they created because life is hard. And sometimes getting to escape into another world is what you need. And it's better when that world has a solid core of reality and truth to it, being out in the woods, being out in the forest among animals and trees and leaves and the creek and everything. And it's even better when that world, that escape that you take, is into or with another person. Because, people are part of this world too. And people make this world hard for other people. Therefore, it's poetic and just that people should make this world easier for other people too. And that's what Jesse and Leslie do for each other. And it's really beautiful. I'll start unraveling a little bit more as time goes on. I definitely feel like these kids love each other, and that they definitely love each other, and they value each other deeply as friends. They're almost brother and sister. They almost become each other's brother and sister, because Leslie is an only child and Jesse is estranged from his sisters. But in loving Leslie the way he does, and I'm just going to boldly state that's my interpretation of the book, is he loves Leslie and Leslie loves him. That in loving her the way that he did, it taught him how to love his sisters, at least his younger sisters. And it transformed him and helped him to become a better person. And you really only get his perspective. And you really only get the book's told from his perspective. So you don't catch everything that Leslie, you don't catch all her insights. You don't know exactly what she thinks of him. But you can tell that there's an affection. You can tell that there's that love there too. And she definitely cares for him and is tender towards him, but in her own tomboyish, fun sort of way. And it's really interesting to see the interplay of their relationship and to think about how it's changed both of them. And again, like I'm saying, it's more clear how it changes him than how it changes her. Yeah, that's what I'll say for now. I'm going to pivot to something else, and I will get back to women in tight jeans, okay? Don't worry, I will not abandon that. And again, this is a family-friendly show where I'm talking about what should be family-friendly books in a family-friendly way. Now, now, what I'll continue to say is that there is, while this is a family-friendly book, there is darkness in it, and there is negativity that happens, for sure. There's a girl at school who is a bully, who you learn in the course of the book is being physically abused by her father on a regular basis. And Leslie is able to offer her comfort, and Leslie and Jesse basically become friends with her after helping her not even really deal with it. Like, she's going to continue to be abused by her father, beaten by her father. And the book never addresses that. It lets it be because it's a fact of life. And while this book has this fantasy element of Terabithia at the heart of it, because it's this world that allows these kids to escape, and it's just the two of them, it allows them to escape from things, and I don't know if they escape to the world and process things, or if it's just the world that they escape to together. It makes them better, stronger, nobler people, and they can do things like comfort this girl, but there's no magic that's going to fix that. She's still going to be abused by her father. The facts don't change because you're better at coping with them, or, in the process of the book, they're better at coping with them, and that's, heartbreaking, but it's true, and it almost makes it even more beautiful, and it makes the imaginative world of Terabithia more important and more powerful in a way, even though it can't change things, but it can sort of make them better. And golly, that's that's really interesting and that's fascinating. It's interesting too because this girl, this bully, she had been mean to Maybelle, Jesse's little sister, and he ended up they ended up together, Jesse and Leslie, coming up with a plan to humiliate the bully, whose name I can't remember right now. They mock her, they call her fat, I don't know if they call her ugly, but they call her fat for sure, and they, plan to embarrass her in front of the whole school, which is awful, that's bad. But they're kids. They're kids without, a strong moral guidance. Jesse and his family never go to church because of something. They go to church at Easter, I think that's it, not even Christmas, just Easter, because of something that happened between his mother and the pastor, I guess, at the church that they go to occasionally. And Leslie's parents, they're not religious. And, they're not religious. I don't know. I didn't even, she challenges Jesse about a matter of, scriptural doctrine. And she asks him, have you even read the Bible? And he's like, oh, I've read most of it. It's about the only book we have here, which is interesting. But, she comes from a much wider world. She's kind of I don't know, I think her family comes from Arlington, which I don't know if at the time, if that was considered to be a big city or not. Heck, I don't even know if it's really a big city now because I don't pay attention to states I don't live in and their specific cities. Sorry, it's who I am. I hope you can cope with that. And anyway, but she just comes from a different world. Her parents are well-educated. Not only are they well-educated, but they're well-informed. They listen to the news. Or are they misinformed? How does that go again? Anyway, so, and Jesse's parents are basically country bumpkins. And that's all they are, and that may be all they'll ever be. And her parents being yuppies or hippies, and his parents being, country bumpkins, that's never judged by the book. The parents, at least his parents, think his mom thinks that her parents are going to judge her for, being so humble and, offering them ham sandwiches at one point, because that's the best this poor Southern woman has to give. And, that's really interesting and endearing and sweet. And, the book doesn't say anything about it. It doesn't say whether she's stupid and backwards for worrying about that, or whether they do judge her. You don't get to see that perspective, but she feels insecure. You get that perspective. You get Jesse's perspective, knowing that his mom is insecure about their poverty and about the fact that they're so country, and that these people who aren't country, or as country, being from Arlington, are, coming to them and having to deal with them in this way. But gosh, I don't know. It's just like so, it's such a realistic book, and yet it's so, I think, family friendly, kid friendly. Like, it's definitely, dramatic, dark, sad stuff happens, but like, yeah, that happens in life too. That happens in life too. And the book portrays that so beautifully. I'm going to start opening up again a little bit more. And again, this is a family friendly show, but I'm an adult and I'm speaking to adults, concerning their children, concerning these books and, whether or not they would like them and how, they should regard them or things they should maybe be cautious about regarding their children reading these books. So here we go. For context, I criticize Tuck Everlasting for Winnie Foster, calling Jesse Tuck beautiful and kind of being in love with him and being infatuated with him while she was kidnapped and taken to his home with his family. Which again, it was a gentle kidnapping, and you gotta hear the whole context to understand why I could feel that way and why I could think the kidnapping is okay. But nobody does any kidnapping in this book. Nobody calls anybody beautiful, explicitly. There is a teacher at the school who is a liberated woman, because it's the late 70s, I think, and she wears jeans, tight jeans apparently, with a funny cut, which I think means bell bottoms, but I don't know for sure. And none of the other women at the school do. And she comes in only on Fridays, I believe, as the music teacher and does this music singing thing with the kids where she's playing her guitar and they're playing or, hacking away at other instruments, trying to play and all singing along, whether it's, I don't know if it's Beatles songs. I feel like they mentioned Beatles, but, playing popular music and also like, I don't know if it's not God Bless America. It's like the national anthem or something. They sing something patriotic as well. And I don't know if they sing any churchy songs being the South. I feel like it's Alabama, but I don't know for sure. But it doesn't really matter. It's supposedly to be non-specific. Anyway, but she's like this bright spot in the school, and she's the reason Jesse tolerates going to school. And she, like, her songs and her joy and her, I guess her attractiveness, like, it appeals to him as a 10 or 11-year-old boy. And he, like, never lusts after her. He's not disgusting about it. He never outright calls her beautiful, I don't think. But you can tell he's kind of like got a kid-level crush on this teacher. And at one point, she takes him out to a museum during this time where it's like pouring rain, torrential rain, right after Easter. It's during the Easter break, spring break, whatever. And she takes him to this museum, and he has a good time with her. He enjoys it, and he almost wishes that Leslie's with them, but he didn't really have a chance to get her. I don't know. It's somewhere between he didn't have a chance to get her to come along and he didn't ask, because this is his favorite teacher who, yeah, maybe he's sort of in love with her, infatuated with, and that's okay, because no lines ever get crossed. Like, she doesn't talk about it like it's a date, but she talks about how when she takes a man out, she, because she's a liberated woman, she pays her own way and things like that, because he's a poor kid. And, like, she's saying these things to comfort him, and he panics at one point because he doesn't have any money to pay for food while they're out at the museum together, and she handles it, but, like, she plays it off almost as if they're out on a date. She calls him a man, which he's not, and she, again, pretends kind of like they're on a date, but not really. Like, it's just a joke, and it's just a way to cover over this uncomfortable thing that this kid's impoverished, and you don't want to embarrass him by pointing that out. So instead, she turns it into something else, and makes it okay that he's not paying because they're not going Dutch. She's taking care of the whole bill this time. Maybe next time he'll take care of it or whatever. But like that's all it is, and it's very innocent and very sweet. And I don't feel like she was a creeper at all. It was the 1970s. I think this sort of thing would happen in the 1970s in the South with a single woman. If she was married, maybe her husband would be there with her, but then again, if she was married, she probably wouldn't have taken Jesse, or maybe she would have taken him and another kid or two. But, those things kind of don't matter. And I feel like it's a completely different circumstance. She ostensibly gets permission from him. He goes and tries not too hard to wake up his mom, and she kind of rolls over and mumbles yes, then goes back to sleep. So, that's not her, though. That's not on the teacher, whose name I don't remember at the moment. That's not on her. She wasn't doing that. She was, in good faith, trying to get permission from his parents. She asked, do you need to get permission? He said, yes, I do. Yes'm, I do, ma'am. I'll be right back. And he went and got permission, so to speak, from his mother. But that's his infraction. That's his violation. That's nothing on her. And then nothing untoward happens. Nothing even whiffing of creepiness happens. He just mentions the fact that, like, she's got pretty hair and, you know, it brushes against his face when she's leaning over to talk to him about something, and he, like, takes note of it, which is, like, very much a reasonable thing to happen, but it's not treated like she's not taking advantage, and he's not really being a creep either. He's not taking advantage of it. He's shocked by it, and his mind is kind of blown by it, but it's not that way. And yeah, you may argue that I'm justifying it because it was a boy in this circumstance and not a girl, but hey, you know what? Go ahead, argue with me. Let's talk about it. If you read the book, especially if you read it recently, then let's talk about it, and you can tell me where I'm missing things or where I've turned a blind eye to secret hidden creepiness in this book. You know, like unto Tuck Everlasting, but yeah, I don't see it. And if you can reveal it to me in some conversation, I'd be happy to hear you out, but I don't see it. I don't see it. It feels really innocent to me, and it feels handled very well, even though, like, yeah, maybe he, you know, or he definitely had a crush on this lady, and maybe he could have said he was in love with her, and maybe he could have, like, he didn't try to, like, oh, I'm going to get her to kiss me, or I'm going to, you know, kiss her, or, like, hold her hand, or hug. None of that happened. None of that happened at all. And I'm just being defensive over the book now. Now, we are late into this episode. This is the longest so far an episode of Fortress Fiction has gone, and I'm going to let it go a little bit longer, because I'm going to get into the guts. I'm going to get into the full spoilers. We're going to go 100%, so if you have not read this book, but you're intrigued about this book, about a friendship between a boy and a girl in the South, where they basically become brother and sister to each other, where they become like family to each other, because they're both kind of on the outs and alone in their own way, and they find solace and comfort in each other. But then there's this whole thing about this, you know, this teacher that I've been going on about, you know, what's going to happen? Why would somebody ban this book? Well, I'll tell you right now. If you haven't gotten out of here, I'll give you like 5 more seconds, and I'm going to tell you what happens. The reason this book is banned is apparently because 10 years old, according to some people, is not an appropriate age to deal with death. Death is not a topic appropriate for 10-year-olds. 10-year-olds encounter death, though. They encounter it in their grandparents, God forbid in their own mother and father, God forbid they experience it with a sibling or a friend. And that's exactly what happens in this book. Leslie dies. I didn't go over this, and we never talked about why the book is called Bridge to Terabithia, but I'll just say it now. It's because at the end of the book, Jess builds a bridge to Terabithia so that his sister, Maybelle specifically, and maybe even the younger one below her, can enjoy Terabithia safely one day, because he's going to introduce them to the wonder and magic and imagination of Terabithia, which he was king of and Leslie was queen of until she died. And the way that they got into Terabithia was through swinging over a rope, or swinging over a little dry stream, which becomes full of water during those April showers, during the Easter break. It rains and rains and rains, and it's so swollen that Jesse is scared to go over the water, and he wants to cross some other way, but they never have a full conversation about it. And then I guess while he's at the museum with the teacher, Leslie goes ahead and wants to go to Terabithia herself and enjoy it in the rain like they had previously, like just the other day, and she ends up slipping off, falling into the water. The water's moving quickly. She hits her head against a rock. I assume she drowns and dies, and that's awful. Like, this book's only 3 hours long, and somehow in that 3 hours, or less than 3 hours, I have enough of a strong emotional connection. Maybe it's because I'm thinking about, God forbid, this sort of thing happening to my own kids. Or just how sad it would be to lose a friend like that, or to lose your child. I thought about my wife, you know. I'll just, the phrase, she's my Leslie, comes to mind. And that's not entirely accurate. But it's close enough to be true that, like, to imagine losing your best friend like that is awful. And then also being a father, to imagine losing your child like that is absolutely awful. And it's so sad. And it's so bitter. But the book is sweet overall. And it's even sweet in the mourning process. And I mean, surely it's bittersweet, but like, I don't know. It's a beautiful book. It's a beautiful book, even though this little girl dies, this innocent little girl dies, and then this innocent boy is left to deal with that. The fact that his friend is dead and he can't do anything about it. There is no magic that can bring her back, and I don't know. He wants to deny it. He pretends it didn't happen for a while until he admits that it did, and then he processes it. And, it's so hard to talk about. He ultimately processes it after his mother and father treat him kind of in a special way, and his dad tries to comfort him, but he doesn't have the words, and he just holds his son and tells him, yeah, this is hard. Like he says, hell. Like, it don't get any easier. Or it gets worse, I think is what he tells him. And, his estranged father, who, for many reasons, couldn't be close to him anymore, and that hurt Jess in a big way, through this tragedy, they become a little closer. And there's, like, healing for him in drawing close to some of his family. His father, for sure. Maybe his mother. Probably his mother. She seems like a good lady. She's just tired and poor and trying hard. And his little sister, Maybelle, beneath him for sure. Jess comes closer to her and helps her. He turns to her and helps her with open arms and with warmth. And that helps to heal him and help him cope with the tragic loss of his friend. And, it's beautiful. It's so beautiful. I need to take a break because I'm super emotional and I don't know what to say other than spending the next 5 minutes just figuring out different ways to say this is a beautiful book. So I'm back. I have recovered, and we'll see if I collapse again under the weight of my heart, under the weight of emotions, but here we go. So, I was thinking about this book a little bit more, and the last thing I want to close out with is just a little bit of, well, first of all, before I get going, I want to remind you that I'd love to hear your thoughts on this book. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Were you as shocked as me when you saw the film adaptation and it went from being something cool and fantastical and fun to something heartbreaking? Because that was a shocker to me. Anyway, but yeah, any questions you have about it, any thoughts you have about the book itself or about my possible hypocrisy and liking the complexity of relationships that we explore with Jess a little bit, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on all that stuff. So, before I forget, because I'm going to get spun up, I was really pleased with the fact that there were some literary references, there were some realpolitik references here. Like the story didn't hold back on being very realistic and feeling very much like it was a slice of life cut out of somebody's life, someone's real world. And presenting it to you as, this fantastical story. And the thing is, it's not really a fantastical story. The wonder and the magic that the kids experience is fantastical, but we don't really get to see. It's like set dressing. It's just there in the background, humming along all on its own. I don't know what Terabithia looks like, sounds like, anything like that. To me it's vaguely Narnia, which they reference the Narnia books. Leslie lends Jess all her Narnia books, which is super cool. They also reference the adventures of an assistant pig keeper, which I'll just tell you is the Chronicles of Berdane, which is amazing, because I think, weren't those books super new? I think those books came out in the 70s, so that's like super, and also, the first book came out, I believe, early 70s, so that's like super of the time, super modern, or super, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not sure. But the whole Chronicles of Berdane, that's fantastic book series. I don't believe I've included any of Lloyd Alexander's masterpiece. I haven't read all this stuff, so I couldn't tell you, but it's a fantastic set of books, 5 books. Those are a hard recommend. I don't think I'm going to be talking about them in this 2024 Fortress Fiction, but they definitely, obviously, they belong in the Fortress Fiction. They are potentially a wonderful foundation piece and keystone and cornerstone and all that good stuff for the Fortress Fiction because they're just that darn, they're just that blessedly good. So anyway, check those out. And they're not better or worse than Terabithia. They are different. They're entirely different breeds of books meant to do different things, but they're both, beautiful and heartbreaking in their own ways. I would say the Chronicles of Bridane less so than Bridge of Terabithia, but they're still great stories. Anyway, great stories, wonderful, fun characters. But anyway, they mention Lewis, they mention Alexander. They don't talk about Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit at all. There's no mention of those. What else is there? I don't know. I was really surprised and pleased with the TV and music and general pop culture references. These feel like real kids in the real time, and there's even talk of Vietnam War, being post-Vietnam War, and it's just I don't know. It was very cool, the realness of the world. The only thing is that I don't think there were any Marvel or DC Comics characters mentioned, which I'm fine with. It's just, and maybe being out in the sticks, Jess wouldn't have had very good access to those. But my impression is that people in rural southern states also had decent access to, Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Iron Man, Batman if you must, Superman, I guess, too. You see where my biases might lie. But anyway, I liked it. It felt like Leslie and her family, because her parents are so well educated, they're very well rounded and worldly, and they want to absorb all this culture and stuff. Which to me is more. I'm closer to Jess's dad, blue collar. Except I'm really into books, right? But I'm much closer to being blue collar than being a yuppie. I think. I don't know. I definitely work a blue collar job. I'm in a blue collar work vehicle right now. Driving it down the road, in blue jeans and stuff. So, I don't know. It's weird, and it doesn't really matter how I assess myself, but I definitely identify and have an appreciation for the blue collar among us. And yet, I do think that fiction is accessible, especially fantasy is accessible, because it just takes you to another world. And both the yuppie and the poor farmer kid can enjoy the marvel and the wonder and the fantasy of being in a kingdom and watching an epic battle involving good and evil and kingdoms and crowns and knights and wizards and witches and stuff like that. Everybody can appreciate that, because I think those stories are so mythic that they just take on that you can see the archetypes through them, or you can feel the archetypes through them, and that matters more than anything else. You can see your, uncle or your grandpa or the nice guy down the street as the wizard, or maybe your mom's the wizard because she's into alternative medicines and stuff. And, maybe your dad's the warrior, or heck, maybe it's even your mom who's dealing with, bedtime and sick kids and, teachers being upset with her kids, and, she does her battle every day. And your dad's the ranger going off and then coming back, tired and bringing in something for the family. It just, it all scales. All the fantasy, I've heard this said, and I don't know if it's true because I haven't studied it, but I believe it's probably true, that when we read something, when we watch something, we experience that thing. Our brains don't really understand that these things are happening to characters, to fictional characters. They feel, they perceive, they see these things as if they're happening to us. And that's really groovy. And I think that's something that people know. I think it's something that people who write books and want to tell stories intuit. They know that their stories matter because they know that they can make an impact on people. And I, one, appreciate that and I like that, and I felt that in this book. And two, I feel like the nods that Kathy... Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm not trying to be flippant or disrespectful. I just can't remember the author's name. I was more focused on the book itself than who she is. But I feel like she felt that, and she knew that, and she, kind of had that in mind. Katherine Paterson. I think later in some of her other books, she's Katie Paterson, but here, Katherine Paterson. That's her name. That's the author of this wonderful, wonderful book. The excellent author of this wonderful book. And I think she was saying, like, yeah, you know, I'm not a Tolkien. All right, Tolkien wasn't mentioned. I'm not a Lewis. I'm not a... Who else did I mention? Oh, I'm not an Alexander. I'm not any of these people. And I'm not jealous of them, and I admit that their books are great and wonderful and beautiful and have amazing things in them, and I cherish them and treasure them so much that I'm going to make these kids in my story also treasure and cherish them as well and gain so much from them, and that's really cool. And, I mean, the time that they must have known each other, they got together in the beginning of the school year, which is like the fall, and then by the spring, Leslie was dead. And in between then, Jess must have devoured the Chronicles of Narnia and some of the other books. So that's pretty cool. And then even like the way there's this really interesting conversation they have because Leslie isn't religious, and she goes to Easter Sunday, I guess sunrise service or whatever with the family, with Jess's family, and Maybelle ends up talking to her, and there's almost like a philosophical debate and question and thing like or debate kerfuffle kind of thing, because Leslie and her family aren't religious at all, and Jess's family ostensibly are, to the point that Maybelle says you have to believe the Bible. If you don't believe the Bible, that's not okay. Like, how can you do that? And you're going to go, like, the Bible says, I learned, basically Maybelle said, I learned that if you don't believe everything the Bible says, you're going to hell. And Leslie wasn't raised that way, and she says, how can you say that? Does the Bible say that? Did you actually read that in the Bible? She challenges their presuppositions, which I believe, I've read the Bible cover to cover many times, and I know for a fact that it doesn't say that if you don't believe everything the Bible says, whether that's some of it or all of it, that you're going to hell. That's not how God works. That's not how God works at all. In fact, the character of God is so merciful that he lets people keep on sinning, and he forgives them and wants them to do better. And that's part of the reason I have the beliefs I do, and that's the way I understand God. And it's interesting that this ostensibly religious family doesn't see that, or doesn't see the graciousness and the love and the mercy of God, and yet this well-learned girl from an unreligious family, she sees that in the service and in the message that's being shared when she goes and visits with the family. And I think that's pretty interesting, and I don't quite know what that means, but it's interesting, and it creates a very interesting touch point later that, like, Jess is worried that Leslie might be burning in hell, which is an awful thought, and his father assures him that, he's like, where did you hear that from? Like, there's no way God is going to send a little girl to hell to burn because, whatever, for any reason, really. And I believe that's true. I believe that's right. And that's a meaningful, hopeful, beautiful message, and that's part of it. So, and you can take that from being a fundamentalist religious person, or you can take that as a secular person who doesn't really believe in the stuff, kind of like Leslie and her family. But you can still see that and feel that message of hope and that message of mercy and grace, and it's beautiful. So, I think I've reached the point where I have nothing more to say about this book except to laud it, and other than suggesting that you read it, I don't have anything to say. So, if you have anything to say, I'd love to hear it. You can leave comments wherever you find this post. Again, go over to mjmunoz.com, and you can find the post for this episode and leave notes after the fact. Or hopefully you were one of the people who got comments in before I edited the episode, and I include them coming up next. Now, this endeavor of Fortress Fiction and Story Over Everything paused for a while, like a couple months, and then I came back with a vengeance to do Fortress Fiction, among other things. And I do want to invite from here on out, at the end of the book, at the end of the book chat, I'm going to tell you what book I'll be reading next, and I want to invite people to make comments on those, on the upcoming book. So, if you can get it from Cloud Library, everything's on Audible on my list, for sure. But if you can get it from Cloud Library or some other legal and free source, I suggest you do that. So Bridge to Terabithia is classified by me as modern middle grade. So the next book will be a classic middle grade book. because that's the pattern. It's going to be Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, which was published apparently in 1868. It's a coming-of-age story about the 4 March sisters during the Civil War era. So that should be interesting. I've never seen an entire Little Women movie from start to finish, and I've never even tried to read one of the books. So I'll be reading an interesting, I guess you could say that Bridget Terabithia is a coming-of-age story written by a woman about a boy, mostly. And, well, then Little Women's going to be a coming-of-age story written about 4 girls by a woman. And, yeah, it'll be interesting. They're about 100 years, like 90 years apart from each other when they were created and released. So that'll be interesting. And we'll see how well I like that. And, again, I invite you to make comments on the book as well, because it's a classic. My eldest read it and loved it, so I'm looking forward to it. It should be interesting. I like Jane Austen. I hope you enjoyed that. Subscribe to keep up with me. Like and share to help me reach more people like you. And go to mjmunoz.com to find your next favorite thing. And don't forget to let your voice be heard. Stories are always better when you're part of the conversation. Until next time, be well. This is MJ signing out. This has been a Story Over Everything production.